breaking chains, burning ships, drowning in grace. This is Three Nails X, breaking chains, burning ships.
Welcome back to the last week of Jesus' life. We're continuing through the temple disputes where we're really going to look at what it's like to debate like Jesus. And so if you remember our last video, we ended up kind of talking about the final week of Jesus's life, with Sunday being the triumphant entry, Monday the temple clearing, Tuesday the temple debates, Wednesday's unknown, or Last Supper starts Wednesday. But we're going to really jump into the temple disputes now, because this is a very important topic, and I think it's a topic that Christians need to be far more aware of, and it is debating like Jesus. Jesus, in his final week here, is going to debate many different people and answer these questions that are very heated at times. And so before we even jump into the debates, we've got to ask a few questions. We've got to think about debating and debates that we've been in. So if I ended up asking you, what's the biggest debate you've ever heard, or what made it important, and what was it regarding, what would your answer be? Sometimes we debate about humorous things, right? Um, is a taco a sandwich? Is cereal a soup? A lot of times when I end up bringing this up to people, we end up having fun debates like that, especially students will have just fun debates. But then we also need to think through what's the most important debate we've ever had and what makes it important. Because sometimes we get caught up joking, debating about whether a taco's a sandwich or should pineapple go on pizza, but we really shouldn't debate that as vigorously as other topics, right? If we're giving an answer for the Christian faith, then we really should debate that more. We should hash that out, but not whether, you know, pineapple should go on a pizza. Now, it shouldn't go on a pizza, first off, but I wouldn't debate that very heavily with people because it's not truly that important. It's a fun debate, though. So I want you to think through debates that you've had, disputes that you've had. When are they important? When are they not? And we're going to see when Jesus debates and when he considers it important, and when, well, it's not as important. But we also have to answer another question of, what is the purpose of debating? Is the purpose of debating to win the argument, or is it to become more familiar with both sides of the argument? I think this is important when we have these discussions, to think through the purpose of it. If I'm debating certain political views, I think we should probably approach it in a way where we learn from other sides. We learn from each other. We're not necessarily trying to win, but we're trying to get to a solution, right? But if we're debating, if we're having a conversation about the Christian faith and whether Jesus died and rose again, I'm going to give you many reasons for why I believe that is so. And that's very important to win the argument, but really to show the logic of why what I'm saying is correct. And so we've got to think through that purpose when we are debating. And we also have to ask the question, is it good or is it bad? Sometimes debating, very not great. It divides friendships and ruins relationships, and other times it's a great gift. So it all depends on what the debate is and where we're having it. So we're going to jump into Jesus's debate here, the first debate he's got going. Before we look at the first debate, though, it's important to get situated with a few of the people groups. Jesus is going to end up having debates with members of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is the Jewish high court. Okay, this is just a general overview. It's the Jewish high court where they would handle legal matters pertaining to the law. More specifically, when it comes to faith, is usually what they focused in on, the Jewish faith and following Torah. Now, the Sadducees, we're going to see them. They're more political and they don't believe in an afterlife. And we'll get more about them, we'll hear more about them when we end up addressing the Sadducees debate. Now, the Pharisees are closer to Jesus in belief. They tended to be too legalistic and works righteousness. Um, I don't usually like referring to them as works righteousness because they weren't doing it in order to earn heaven or anything like that, but they were doing it because they believed that when Israel was holy, the Messiah would come. And so they were strict in following Torah laws because they wanted the Messiah to come back. And so we're going to enter into our first debate here. It is in the Gospel of Mark, verses 11. Chapter 11, verses 27 to 33. And they came again to Jerusalem as he was walking in the temple. The chief priests and the scribes and elders came to him. And they said to him, "By what authority are you doing these things?" Or, who gave you this authority to do them? Okay, now that's a big question. What are these things? What is he referring? Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. Was the baptism of John from heaven or from man? Answer me." And they discussed it with one another, saying, "If we say from heaven, he will say, 'Why did you not believe him?' But shall we say from man?" They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." And so, what is the debate? What is the "these things" that is occurring? Well, it's going to refer back. Who gave you authority to do these things? This is referring to the temple clearing. And so, who gave Jesus authority to clear the temple, which is a sign that judgment is coming on it, that it's not operating like it should? And isn't it the priest's job to do that? And so, who gave Jesus authority? So, this is a big question. There's really only two answers to this, isn't it there? Who gave you this authority? We have two answers. We have God. Or what's the other answer? If God didn't do it, we have man. Like, those are kind of our two options. Either no one gave it or God gave it. And so these are the two options that Jesus has. Now, if Jesus answers either way, think about what would happen to him. If he says, "God gave me the authority to destroy the temple," they're going to be like, "No, no, absolutely not. According to law, we're supposed to have the temple. So you're going against God, and therefore you stopped sacrifices, and therefore there should be vast punishment for you. There should be extreme punishment. You probably should get the death penalty," right? So if Jesus says from God, there's some major problems. They'll be like, "Oh, you're contradicting what God told us to do to offer sacrifices." Now, that's obviously a little bit of a misinterpretation of the Old Testament, but that is how they would be interpreting this. Now, if Jesus says from man, think about the problem there. I stopped temple worship because I wanted to. That's not going to fly well either. So Jesus is, perfect example here. Jesus, this is a trap. This is a trap. Because if he says God or man, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. So, we've got to keep that in mind. Jesus recognizes immediately it's a trap. Now we got to ask the question, starting us off, right? Who are the chief priests and scribes? Chief priests, scribes, we have high leaders up in the Sanhedrin. Some translations say the Sanhedrin came out to have this conversation. So this is not, and this has got to be clear, this is not like an informal setting where they're sitting around the dinner table. No, this is like Jesus is being questioned publicly, and it's kind of this like trial, and if he answers improperly, there can be some major ramifications, some major problems. And so if we go back here to this verse, right? Do you see Jesus doesn't answer the question, instead he asks a question. Now the question that he asks, think about it. He asks, is John the Baptist, and he gives them two options. Is it from heaven or from man? Jesus has put them in the same predicament they were in. Where if Jesus answered either way, he's in trouble. Now, if the scribes, if the Pharisees, if the priests and scribes and the elders, if they answer saying from heaven, then they would be saying John is a prophet, and what John says then has to be true. Who does John say Jesus is? So they would be confessing Jesus has authority to clear the temple. Do you see this logic that's playing out? So if they say from heaven, then what they're saying is John's a prophet, and if John's a prophet, what he said is true. Jesus is the Messiah. Therefore, Jesus can clear the temple. He's totally fine. So they know they can't say that, or they have their question answered for them. But if they say from man, they're afraid of the people, that John was a prophet. So it was well known that John was a prophet. So if they say from man, they're putting their head in the sand, and they're going to lose the respect of the people who are like, obviously John is a prophet. And so Jesus, in this debate, instead of going, I'm the Messiah, I can clear the temple if I want, he strategically goes and asks them a question that traps them back. And so this is what we've got to realize, because Jesus has not just been trapped answering one way or the other, but he actually traps them back. Because if John is a prophet, Jesus is the Messiah. If not, if they say he's not a prophet, the people would reject the Pharisees. They would reject them. They lose their influence, and they don't want to lose their influence and power. So how do we learn to debate like Jesus based off this first dispute? Well, it's really simple. It's super simple. So our first one here is just do not answer the question, ask a question. This especially works in hostile situations. If someone is asking me my thoughts on a contentious topic, a topic that's debated, I probably shouldn't answer that right away. I probably should be careful and maybe ask a question back, as that will go better than me just straight up answering the questions, especially in hostile situations. And so when Christians debate, we've got to recognize there's different times, different places, and we need to be smart about it. At the end of the day, does Jesus win the debate? 100%. Because the Pharisees' job was to weigh legal matters. And here Jesus proves they can't even weigh a simple matter of whether Jesus can clear the temple. That is their entire job, is to handle religious matters, and they can't figure out the answer to this one. So what does it look like to the people? Jesus has navigated the debate, he's gotten out of it, and he shows that he's in the clear, and they can't do anything because they can't even answer the simple question. So, ask a question, and I'll see you next time where we learn how to debate like Jesus, the second way, in the second dispute.
This is 3 Nails X. Breaking chains, burning ships, drowning in grace. This is 3 Nails X.